Pimfluencer, the podcast for digital product experiences.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pimfluencer podcast. My name is Alexander Semrel. I'm the managing director here at ContentServe for the US, which means working very closely on our go-to-market strategy. Today, I have a very special guest joining us, Rob Neumann from CSS Commerce, who is an expert in e-commerce and product experiences. What we'd like to discuss today is digital commerce, omnichannel strategies, two topics that I think are becoming increasingly important in the digital world. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Alexander, and I appreciate it. As the Chief Digital Officer of CSS Commerce, I am always thinking about what do people need and where should we go and how do we best serve the needs of not only my customers, but their customers, because that's really the goal, is helping people achieve what they need to achieve.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Rob, for that. Could you also share a little bit of background, what led you to the creation, to the formation of CSS and how you're working with customers today?
Sure. So my business partner and I started out in working with one of the preeminent implementation companies that really focused a bit on PIM. And as the leaders there, we realized that there was a tremendous opportunity in the United States for really a European concept of PIM, right? When we started, it wasn't widely known, it wasn't wildly popular. But through education, people came to realize that if you have high SKUs, you have high product variation and attributes and things like that, it's tremendously valuable. Now, the additional elements that really drove this in Europe of multi-language, multi-currency is really a value as companies grow, right? You add the Canadian market, you've got French. You add the Latin American market, you have both Spanish and Portuguese. So we do have a number of multinationals, right, with language needs. And we also have a number of US companies that just, while they aren't multilingual, multi-currency, they certainly have millions of SKUs and hundreds of attributes per SKU, and that gets complex.
Got it. Yeah, so a really unique approach then, taking a European model and transforming it into the US for US customers and also some multinational customers as well.
Yeah, and that's what we really saw as the opportunity. So we formed CSS with the idea, really have always been a PIM first company, although obviously we work with e-commerce and connecting to a variety of other systems because those are natural affiliations. But we really drive on the product experience, the user experience, and making things understandable for our customer and their customer to find and buy what they're after.
Brilliant, Rob. Thank you so much for sharing some more background. What I would propose is let's dive into our topics for today regarding digital commerce and omnichannel strategies. Why do you think that these two elements are important today? And what do they actually mean for our listeners?
Sure. So omnichannel is really a key concept, and I want to define it first, right? So the old distribution model of manufacturer to distributor to sub-distributor to stores to consumers is already changed, right? The pandemic has driven that quickly. And it's not really just that, right? It's how do you sell? Do I sell through distributors? Do I sell directly through my salespeople? Do I have my own e-commerce platform? Do I have multiple brand e-commerce platforms? Do I have a direct-to-consumer presence? Or am I also aggregating and selling online on other people's properties? Most famous is Amazon business, but the truth is Amazon business doesn't apply to everything. But there are a lot of other aggregation groups in the parts industry. There are companies like Alibaba, which I think are pretty rudimentary, but a number of customers use them, and consortium groups that they sell through. All of these kinds of things create an omni-channel opportunity for manufacturers and distributors to sell things to different customers, different margins, different cost structures, and different access to different markets. And that's what we think about when we talk about an omni-channel. And how do you manage all of that in an easier manner?
Yeah, and Rob, you mentioned specifically manufacturers and distributors. How successful do you think that manufacturers and distributors have been in adopting an omnichannel strategy within their business model?
I think that the early adopters are extremely successful, and it allows you to differentiate your customers, right? So, one of the key things in marketing and pricing is to be able to differentiate customers and extract maximum value, right?
Mhm.
And that's very hard for distributors and some manufacturers because they
Yes.
may or may not have brand power. They may or may not have their own OEM set of products. Some do. The ability to sell those in different ways or to jump the gap, if you will, and go direct to a consumer, skipping a section of cost and structure creates new opportunities. So, what we see is one, higher margin opportunities for these companies.
Hmm.
Two, just refocusing their salespeople, right? A lot of salespeople get measured in such a way that encourages them to take orders as opposed to seek new customers. And most managers, right, they always fear my salespeople aren't working as hard as I think they should. And it's an opportunity to work with them to show them, look, you can get people to use online and free you up, right, to do other things. I think if you structure incentives properly, there's
Hmm.
tremendous opportunity. And then the
Hmm.
last, right, is your ability to actually rebrand. If you're a manufacturer, right, and you want to do a discounted line, you certainly don't want to do that on your own website. You certainly don't want to do it on mainline distributors. But if you go through an aggregation source where you put it online and you do some changes, you can be very, very aggressive and capable in handling your
Hmm.
pricing in different ways. So
Hmm.
we have some customers that have one in particular I'm thinking of. They took their OEM product, branded it, and sell it direct to consumer as an alternative online while they're still maintaining a very vibrant distribution company selling a variety of things. So opportunity abounds.
Indeed, I would definitely agree with that, Rob. And what it sounds like is that there's also an element or a process of change management that's taking place there, right, for a company to successfully adopt that type or that business model. Would you give any advice to potential listeners today that would like to adopt an omnichannel strategy but might not know how to start or how to successfully adopt it?
Sure. Well, let's leave aside the marketing side and other
Mm.
disciplines. I'll speak to the technical discipline, right? What do you actually need? One of the
Mm.
key things, right, is when you've set yourself up for a direct sales and you have one e-commerce platform, you may not be optimized to take advantage of some of these things. And here's what I'm talking about. You've got to be able to manage your product data in such a way that you can relate it to multiple product numbers or multiple SKUs and be able to sell it and organize it. So let's say you were selling on Amazon direct as a manufacturer. Well, Amazon's going to have its own number. You're going to have your own number, and you need to relate it for ordering to your vendors. And that typically might be done through an ERP, but in omni-channel, that's not the way it's done, right? You're not
Mhm.
pulling from your ERP anything except the one part number and managing the inventory. But managing it across Amazon and a couple of websites, you've got to make that kind of a relationship. So, data quality, being able to make sure you've got the information to do this. Second is relationships around
Mhm.
how the data works with each other. And then third is back to relationships, right? So you've got to make your sales reps understand the opportunity for them. Your marketing and product folks understand what these relationships are. Your operations people understanding that there's going to be demand coming from multiple channels and optimize to be able to handle that inventory. There's some definite opportunity there, but a lot of folks start walking before they run. And those are the key
Mm.
elements in my mind from the background that you really need to think about.
Got it. Okay, thanks very much for sharing that. One of the points that you mentioned was data quality. From
Yeah.
content service side, as a provider of a payment dam solution, we believe data quality is an important bedrock or foundation to have trust, consistency, reliability within the data that you're using on the day to day. Would you agree? And how do you think that customers are progressively trying to improve their overall quality of data?
I absolutely agree. The speed of business has changed. The opportunities are large. And a number of companies in the USA, right, are really trying to transform themselves digitally. And what they come up against when they're doing that, right, is they find out that a lot of their underlying data really needs improvement. For example, often ERPs only have essentially a short description of a product. It might be, anywhere from 45 to 100 characters. It's not a full paragraph of detail. And they've been managing that just on a website. So you can imagine as you begin to open up, that complexity begins to need better management, and throwing people at it isn't really an effective manner. Secondly, the organization of that information lies often in spreadsheets, CAD drawings, and the ERP, right? Being able to bring information together and relate it. Relatable information, searchable information, especially in this age of AI, allows you to take much more advantage of what you have. And, being able to have things hierarchically correct. Because when you begin to think about spares management, kitting, being able to manage replacement parts as you begin to sell, right? If you change how you sell from just a distribution network and you want to go direct to consumer or through some sort of other site, now you're responsible for some of the repair or replacements. And you've got to think through that. And data that allows you to relate specific parts, kits, whatever to your product becomes extremely important as you manage that as well.
And recently off the back of that, we've seen the release of new technologies on the AI side. So OpenChat GPT for sure is one. We've seen increase in the ability to forecast demand, to forecast supply as well. How do you think that these can have an impact on data quality in the future moving forward for customers?
Yeah, I think there's a few quick and easy ones, right? And particularly if you have a PIM or you're doing two things. So 2 places we're immediately looking to use chat and AI. ChatGPT, we've incorporated as a tool in order to enhance product data, in order to create better descriptions of similar products with little differentiation, as well as products with major differentiation. But suddenly, right, instead of going one at a time through 100,000 products, right, you can move quickly through them and then make small changes as opposed to trying to write everything yourself. So enhancing data is a great use of Chat GPT. The second thing is I like where you went with inventory. Many times folks start with safety stock. I have a bunch of safety stock sitting for Amazon. I have a bunch of safety stock sitting for Alibaba. And so what you've actually created are these inefficiencies in your inventory. If you use AI to do better prediction of what your inventory needs are by being able to look holistically at your demand as opposed to individual channel by channel by channel, you will improve your costs without a doubt.
Okay. Thanks. And what I would like for us to move on to, Rob, are the potential buying behaviors and customer behaviors, how they've been changing so far. We know that with COVID, that's been an accelerator, definitely in the market, a shift towards digital. I have a study in front of me from Forrester that shows that 68% of buyers prefer conducting their own research online, while only 66% expect companies to have a thorough understanding of their needs and expectations. So obviously, there's a little bit of a gap there. Have you also seen this shift on your side, Rob?
Absolutely. And it takes many forms. So let's talk about first just the base expectation as more and more of a computer-centric generation has taken over is an expectation of I should be able to find what I want on the web and on your website. So number one is if they don't find it, they don't believe you have it. That's a big issue, and PIM is a huge help to change that searching and finding. The second thing is, okay, they've found it, but you have insufficient information. They expect to be able to look at a technical drawing or get specs off of something from a distributor or manufacturer. They're looking for often technical information, and they really don't want to call you anymore. They want to move quickly, and they want the information they're looking for. So browsing has a high expectation of information availability, right? That's number one. Number two is when they do begin to do some selecting, they want to be able to pull and interact, right? So some of our customers, I'll give you a great example. In a pump manufacturer, sizing of the pump, diameters, how the pump closes off, all of those things are configurable, right? You can do a bunch of settings that then spits back a drawing and technical specifications of essentially what you've designed. It's more configuration, but being able to do things like configuration online, understanding when the delivery date is. We've become used to Amazon Prime. I want it now, right?
Yeah.
Well, that isn't the expectation necessarily in B2B. They would like to know, when is it going to arrive? What's my freight cost going to be?
Yeah.
And not on the telephone. These are not things that they expect to have to call a sales rep for.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. A few elements that I'd also advise our audience on to stay on top of buyer demands and changing buyer behavior are definitely the analysis of your existing customer base, which can always help determine buyer trends and also how they're behaving online. I think that's number one. Number two is to run consistent A/B tests and see how you can modify and improve things that work, and how things that might not necessarily be as successful can be improved in the future. Number three is staying on top of your competition. I think that that's really important, just so that you have an understanding of how trends are shaping within the market that you're working in. And lastly, define buying personas, right? So what types of customers am I interacting with as a brand, as a business, and how can we tailor the buying journey for them specifically? Would you also see it that way? Would you add on any points?
Well, I think one of the things about personas then goes and argues for our omnichannel.
Mm.
First thing is, everything you said is trackable and a benefit to the distributor or manufacturer, the seller of goods, because all of that can be seen online. You're able to get better data around your folks and you create a persona. Out of that, you may begin to recognize new behaviors, new customers, new angles, or how they are interacting, that then argues, you know what, we would be better served for these kinds of people to interact with them in a different way.
Mhm.
I agree with everything you said, and the behavior is only going to get more and more online centric. So the trend went first from, having an e-commerce website to everyone is buying on their phone. Even technical items, right? It goes from the phone. Well, now it goes from the phone to the configuration to where can I get the right information, being able to see a bigger picture of things. And in truth, some of the advances I've seen, right? Every new advance in one area is going to come through the industry. So for example, 3D goggles and vision, right? To actually not just look at a flat blueprint, but to interact and touch and feel the actual product and how does it integrate. The more technical your product, actually, the more information people expect to be able to see.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, before we do finish our podcast for today, Rob, would you also have any recommendations for our listeners that you wanted to cover specifically?
Yeah. Here's a couple of things I don't think people think about a lot, right? I mean, I think people think about technology. I think they think about fit. I think they do forget some simple people matters. One, adoption is critical. Gain buy-in in your company to understand and accept that change is coming and how it will affect them. If they're buying in, then you can get participation, and participation across these silos, if you will, of functions is really important, because you want engineering, marketing, product, operations involved. And then when you're actually looking at what do I do? What do I implement? How do I do it? This is where great partnerships like ours, Alexander, come together, right? You're looking at
Absolutely.
software as well as the expertise to implement it and advise you on how best to use it and connect it to your entire ecosystem. So I recommend looking and thinking about things holistically. How is this handled in my ecosystem? Who can I use that understands the ecosystem? And how will this affect things to make it usable, right? And I think that lastly, if you let technical people drive this a little bit too much, they get in the weeds. Always remember, usability is really important for the people who are going to be doing the work.
That was very well said. Rob, and an excellent conclusion, I think, to our podcast for today. Number one, I wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me today. And to our listeners, if you do have any questions, I would encourage you to either contact Rob or myself, and we can definitely help and advise your business for sure. For today, that wraps up the Pinfluencer podcast. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And Rob, thank you for the time once again.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
This was Pinfluencer, the podcast for digital product experiences. More information can be found on www.contentserve.com.